guys, my name is Tiffany and welcome to my channel. So this is going to be my first ever video on YouTube. So if you guys can do me a huge favor and please like and subscribe, that way I know whether to make more content for you guys. And please follow me on Instagram at NICU Nurse Tiff and comment on my most recent post letting me know that you guys came from YouTube, that way I can say hi to you guys. And leave a comment down below whether you're a nurse, a student, or aspiring to be a nurse, and if you are a nurse, let me know what unit you work in. So let's get started with this video. So I thought it'd be interesting to show you guys a day in my life as a neonatal intensive care unit nurse. So I do work night shift and I do work 12-hour shifts. So usually my shift begins at 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and I'll get around the hospital around 6:40ish, and then I'll sit in my car for a little bit and then I'll go up to the unit. So usually the first things first is we get huddle from our charge nurse. So all the nurses will gather around and then we'll do huddle. We'll discuss how our census is like, how many open beds we have, whether we're having any pending admissions, and just any news for the day. And then we get report from our day shift nurses. So I'll usually look at my assignment list to see who my assignment is, and then I'll go to my day shift nurse and then get report from her. So report usually can last for about 30 minutes to an hour, just really depends on how many patients you have. And for me, that day I only had one patient. So usually nurses can be assigned 3 to 1, so 3 patients to 1 nurse. And you can have 2 to 1s and 1 to 1s. So 1 to 1s usually means they're more critical. So for me that day I actually only had one patient. So she was a critical watcher. She was a micropreemie and born at 580 grams. And I believe at the time I was taking care of her, she was about 700 grams. So she is considered to be a micropreemie. And so usually with micropreemies, we will limit each nurse to only one patient depending on how stable they are. And our acuity levels vary, so sometimes we can have a lot of one-to-ones on the unit, and sometimes we'll just have a few one-to-ones and just more watcher patients and stable chronic patients. So it just really depends. So after I get a report from my nurse, I'll usually grab supplies that I need. So the first thing is I'll grab linen for my patients. So I usually go into the linen closet and I'll just grab blankets. Since I'm only changing one isolette, I technically only needed one blanket for my patient, but since I was working a few days in a row, I figured it'd just be best to grab whatever I needed, keep it in the cabinet, and that way the next day when I come, it'll just be ready for me. And then I will grab any other things that I need. So I'll usually go to the bulk room and think in my head, what are possible things that I need for my patient today? At least for my first assessment. Usually I like to make sure my drawers are stocked, whether that is syringes, gauzes, tape, things that I may need for my patient. I try to think in advance what I may possibly use, so that way I don't have to go back and forth, grabbing things that I need. So I'll usually go to the bulk room and grab the supplies that I need, whether it's suctioning, since I am going to be suctioning my patient. She is intubated, so I do have to frequently suction her. So I do grab quite a few suction catheters that I may need, and just any other supplies that you may need. So usually with our assessment, it can begin at any time. Usually I like to do it right after getting a report, but it just really varies. And for us, we try to coordinate our care with our respiratory therapists. So for our respiratory therapists, they can be assigned to multiple rooms and they can get pretty busy. So for me, since I only have one patient, I'm not in such a huge rush. If my patient is stable enough, usually I'll wait for my respiratory therapist. So if I do have some free time, Usually I like to look up my patient history. I'll read up on my patients, figure out why they're here, what we're focusing on for the care for that shift, and what they may possibly need for the rest of the day. So during the free time, that's usually what I do, and then we will start our first assessment. So with my first assessment, and after gathering all my materials, usually we'll go in and assess my patient. For us, we try to limit the amount of exposure that we do to our patients. So sometimes we do assessments every 4 hours, that is our policy, and for our micro preemies, there's orders written by the doctor to do assessments every 6 hours. So it just really depends. For my patient, since she is a micro preemie, and we have this thing called minimal handling that doctors will order, and we try to limit physical touch to every 6 hours. So my first assessment, usually I try to do by 9 o'clock, and we will go in there and assess our patient, suction, change linen, weigh our patients. So since I work night shift, we do weigh our patients every night, and we also do linen changes every night as well. And usually I will start preparing my feed. So I do go up to our fridge in our rooms and I start warming up the milk. We do use these special milk warmers, and so I usually would put it in and I warm up the breast milk depending on how many mLs we're feeding our patient. My patient is on a continuous feed, so we do change our syringes every 4 hours. So at my hospital, we get really lucky with milk techs, and they usually prepare breast milk for us. But sometimes they don't, especially if they're not fortified. So if I do have some free time during my shift, I do like to fortify or make my own breast milk for my day shift nurses. So for my shift, usually I like to thaw out the breast milk first. So we do have a giant freezer that we have a nutrition room that contains all the breast milk that our patients may need, and we also carry other formulas as well. So I'll usually go into the nutrition room, grab the breast milk for my baby, and then I will thaw it. And then while I'm thawing it, I may do other things such as charting or scan any medications that I may have to give for my baby. We check the EMR to see what medications we may give. We do have some scheduled every hour, or we have some scheduled every few hours. And we also do have some PRN medications. So we may have some sedation that we may give, pain management medications that we may give that is PRN. For us, if our babies are intubated, we try to limit the movement. Since my baby is on a jet, it's kind of like a high frequency ventilation. It is invasive on the babies, so we try to sedate them as much as possible and give them pain management. So charting does take a bulk of my day, and most of the time, if we are not doing assessments, we are charting. So if you didn't chart it, you didn't do it. So make sure to be careful to chart everything that you do, be as detailed as possible. So for me, if I'm not busy with my assignment, Usually if I have some downtime in between my assignments and charting, I try to help other nurses out. So I know as a new grad, it may be difficult to get used to your own assignment and try to help other nurses, but I promise you, once you start getting in the groove of things, you will have more time to help other nurses out. And I try to be a helping hand, so when I have some free time, I try to help other nurses, whether it's with new admissions or just trying to help other nurses catch up on their assignments. So actually that day we did have 2 admissions to our room, so I tried to help the nurses with their admissions. And technically, since they aren't my assignments, I really don't have to do anything, and we do have crisis nurses that help out when we get new admissions and things like that. But for me, I like to help other nurses when I can, and so if we have new admissions to the room, I like to be helping hand. Plus, as a new grad, this is a tip for you guys. Once you're starting out, if you have free time and you're not doing anything, I highly recommend helping out with admissions. You learn so much, you guys get that hands-on that you need, and usually all the nurses will thank you for helping them out. So please, if you have any free time, try to help out as much as possible. So usually I like to take my first break before midnight. Sometimes it may not happen and you get caught up in your assignment, or you get a new admission and you don't get to be able to take your break. But for me, I try to take my first break at around 10 if possible. And we do get a second break on our shift. So for 12-hour shifts, we do get 2 breaks. I try to take my second break at around 2-ish. It really depends as well. Sometimes I may not get to, but I try to do it as early as possible, because towards the end of the shift, it gets really busy and sometimes you aren't able to take a second break. So try to get your second break in. I try to do it at 2, and usually I'll just get a quick snack or something like that, and our breaks are usually 30 minutes. So for our shift, usually we may have to assess our patients more frequently. For me, since I do have a one-to-one, and like I said, we try to limit exposure and touching them every 6 hours, but I may have to go in there more frequently. Sometimes I have to go in there every hour. Since my patient does have a PICC line, I do have to assess my line every hour. My patient was running parenteral nutrition and lipids, and we do have medication line. So I do have to go in, assess my PICC line, make sure the dressing isn't lifting, and we do that every hour. And since my patient is on a continuous feed, I do have to change my feeding lines every 4 hours. So that's just according to our policy. So we do check residuals at my hospital, so I do have to go in there, check my residuals, and then hang my feeds. And sometimes we also have scheduled labs. So depending on your patient, some patients may have to do labs every day, sometimes every other day. And for us, our hospital schedules Monday labs as a routine lab. So usually for night shift, if you are working Sunday nights, that means Monday morning you have to do Monday morning labs. And I highly recommend, as a new grad nurse, to schedule yourself to those days where you have to do labs. You do get a lot more practice, and it's definitely good for a new grad nurse to be able to practice doing labs, because it's something that we don't really get to do that often if you are doing day shift. But since I am a night shift nurse, we do have to do labs. And so for me, when I started out, I tried to schedule myself on Sundays. That way I get practice doing Monday labs. So for me, I like to grab my supplies that I need. Usually we have to print out our labels first, figure out what labs are ordered, and then we have to do our labs. So the hardest part about being a NICU nurse is labs. I think that's probably the worst thing about my job that I hate so much. I just feel so guilty whenever I have to heel stick or poke my baby, but it's just part of the job, and I promise you, you will get better at doing labs the more you practice. So usually the end of my shift is around 7 a.m. and our day shift nurses will come soon right after, and we'll give report to the day shift nurses. And usually report for me can last between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what we need to discuss for my whole shift. And we'll talk about any events, any things that might have happened during my shift, and also usually if we have to do any extra checks with the day shift nurses. So for my baby, we actually were on a morphine drip. So normally with our patient, we have to double check with the oncoming nurse your medications, your lines, and just assess your patient. So usually we'll go in, look at our patient, look at the lines, making sure it's patent, and also double checking the medications we give, especially when it comes to narcotics. And then that's usually the end of my shift. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please let me know what other videos you'd like me to make. I hope you learned something, and maybe this might interest you to do NICU in the future. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.